So it's 5, so let's start. I welcome you all. My name is Łukasz Hacura. I've been working in the game dev industry since 2006 at various positions, started as a programmer, and right now I'm a CEO and head of studio at Anshar Studios, where we work on PC and console games. And disclaimer, this is not a production talk. This is a productivity talk, okay? So I'm sure you heard a lot of jokes and memes about the guy who wakes up at 3 a.m. To watch the sunrise, right? Runs a marathon, reads 7 books, meditates for 3 hours, eats breakfast, and starts work at 7. Those assholes. So I'm the asshole. I'm gonna be the guy who's gonna tell you that you can actually do some of that. Where maybe not the sunrise at 3 a.m., but besides that, a lot of that. So my agenda today is to convince you, first, why I think that productivity is crucial, because we talk a lot about optimizing processes of game development and optimizing how we work as a team, but we don't talk nearly often enough, in my point of view, how to optimize oneself and oneself's productivity. Then I'm going to introduce the getting things done concept. I'm going to talk a little bit about the theory of it and then how I implemented it in my life. Then I'm going to touch upon personal knowledge management and do the same. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about how I iterated on it and adjusted it throughout the years and basically having fun with it. And hopefully there's going to be some time left for Q&A. Okay, so let's start. Oh, and yes, indeed, I will share my morning routine because obviously I have one. So for context building, okay, in 2014, I was a young co-founder who just started, like 2 years before started a company. Obviously, I was working 70 hours a week. If I watched one GDC video a week, that was like amazing. But most of my education or self-development was on the job, right? If I needed to research something towards work, obviously I did that, but mostly it was work, work, work. I was 30 years old back then, and it's important context-wise. I'm gonna touch upon that later, why it's super important. I didn't have kids back then. And I was always behind work, always. There was a huge anxiety and pressure that there are so much tasks and I'm just not handling very well because even though I work 70 hours a week, I'm still behind. So my thesis that I'm trying to solve here today with you is basically in game development, we're knowledge workers, right? So we work with our minds mostly. And we live in a world that is super overloaded with distractions, be it social media, be it cell phones, or whatever else, right? There's a lot of distractions. And our work environments are full of distractions, be it remote work or on-site. There are communicators, right? There are meetings, open spaces, whatever it is, there is a shitload of distractions. Video games. And as a result, we're obviously frequently distracted. That leads to shallow and unfocused work, right? And we often feel frustrated and unproductive because of that. So what do we do? Who here thinks that their best working hours are after core hours, when everybody leaves the office, it's 4 p.m., 5 p.m., I can finally do all my job. Raise of hands. Who thinks that? Yeah. So about half of you think they're productive basically after work, right? And or before. So that's a problem, right? So in response, we longer hours to compensate, right? This is how we try to compensate this vicious cycle. But because we're often tired, we're less productive than we could have been, and the cycle continues. What I'm trying to say here is that it doesn't have to. And if you're going to take just one thing from this entire talk, I want to be this, is that you need to realize that you will never, ever dig yourself out of the hole. You are always going to have an infinite amount of tasks coming in your way. So often when we seek productivity, we seek this feeling that, okay, I did everything, now I'm free. This is impossible. You're never going to be free, right? You're never going to rid yourself of the anxiety if you think that the only way of ridding yourself of that anxiety is that you're on time with everything and there are no more tasks to be done. This is fruitless. So the only thing you're actually controlling is the pace and quality of your work. So you're consciously deciding, I'm giving this much hours to this problem or to this problem during the day, and that's it. And suddenly the only question is, did you actually do that? Did you actually spend those hours attacking that problem, right? Your goal is not to do everything that is to be done. And hence the getting things done method. There are a lot of books on productivity out there. I read a lot of books. I read all of these books, but most of them tie to the one book to rule them all. Like mostly everybody is quoting on one way or another. They're quoting the getting things done from the early 2000s. And so what's getting things done? What is this in theory? So you have this very simple process, like it looks very simple on the diagram, where you're trying to capture everything you need to be doing, like every task you have, right? But it's not just your Jira tasks, right? It's like everything you need to do. Like you need to go to that meeting, you need to prepare to that meeting, you need to deliver this documentation, you need to do those Jira tickets, you need to pick up the kids, you need to build a garage, you need to, whatever it is that you're thinking that makes you not go to sleep because this is a task that you know that you need to do, you try to capture that and put it in some kind of system, getting like a to-do list or whatever it's going to be for you. You need to capture it to some kind of a system. And usually it's like a to-do app where there's like an inbox like of unprocessed stream of things that you need to be doing. And believe me, if I tell you, and I talked with many people, they also felt that, the first capture magic, because at first, if you've never done that before, you're not going to do it in an hour. It's going to take you 2-3 days to do the first capture of everything, like download everything you need to handle in your life, in your work, in your private life, whatever. It's going to take you 2-3 days. And this feeling at first, it's magical. It's like, whoa, suddenly it's like I'm alone here. It's like fine. But the thing is that this feeling is going to quickly disappear if you do not trust that you're actually constantly going to capture those things, right? Because your mind's going to get super fast, it's going to get cluttered with new stuff because, as we said, work is endless, right? So there's going to be constant stream of new things coming in, and the only way that this feeling of like mind-free head, anxiety-free head is going to continue is if you trust the fact that, yes, indeed, I did capture that, I put it into a system. Then you do the processing, which is basically you're converting those to-do things into actionable action items, like actionable things to do, like next steps. You do it at least once a week. And the rule is that if it takes less than 2 minutes to do it, don't even make a task out of it, just do it, right? If it's just like sending out an email, no thank you, or whatever else it is, just do it here and there during the processing. But if it takes more than 2 minutes, obviously it's an arbitrary number, right? Depending on yourself, your schedule, and how much time you want to spend on processing. It can be 5 minutes, it can be 1 minute. That number is arbitrary. But if it's a very short task, do it now. If not, put it on your to-do list. And then you do the work. If anything needs to be capturing, you're capturing it, you're processing at least once a week, and the cycle continues. So that's the theory, but how does it work in practice? So how did I implement that? So I have a job that involves a lot of biz dev and biz dev problems and production problems, and so a lot of context switching, right? And one of the obvious places that generates tasks for me is emails, right? I have a private Gmail account and I have a Microsoft account at Anshar Studios. So from Outlook and from Gmail, those are my those are my sources of things that I need to capture. At Anshar Studios, we use Office for scheduling, right? So we use Outlook. So the meetings that are requested are also like things that somebody requires something from me. I need to remember about it, right? Obviously, in this day and age, communicators generate shitload of tasks, right? You get a lot of tasks. Like, for example, at Anshar Studios, we use Slack. So a lot of tasks, like requests for things that you need to handle, they happen on Slack. Whatever communicators you use, I do BizDev, so I have like, I don't know, 11 communicators, different communicators for different countries, apparently. So a lot of those come from there. And I use a car usually to move around, so I don't want to like kill myself. And if I don't have my hands free and I need to like record a thought just to download it from my head, I use a dictaphone app. There are tons of ways of doing it. I use an app, but a lot of phones have like built-in voice memos that you can use. And whenever I'm in a position where I have my hands free, I can do it directly into my to-do list, into my inbox on my to-do list, which I personally use Trello. Again, the application is arbitrary, whatever it's going to be for you, right? There's like a lot of people use Nozbe because this was designed specifically for the getting things done methodology. I use Trello simply because I used Trello before I heard about getting things done, and it was my to-do list back then, so it just was natural for me. And also, interestingly, my wife has a direct access to my inbox, putting tasks there, which helps immensely to relieve the pressure and the anxiety of I'm never gonna get like surprised with like dinner with the family, right? It's like, no, it's right there. I process this, I know this, it's in my calendar, right? Relieves a lot of pressure and tension. So so yes, my wife can directly put things into my inbox. And there are certain automation tools that I use to put stuff, to capture stuff into Trello. Some of them are manual, but for example, emails, I can just send it to a special email account generated by, to a special email address generated by Trello, and it lands into my inbox. For my calendar, I use Zapier. That's an automation tool that has different integrations. So you integrate, in this case, I integrate my Microsoft account with my Atlassian Trello account, and the script automatically puts meeting requests into my inbox. And then everything ends up in Trello, right? My Trello looks like this. So everything ends up in my inbox, so in my left, let's say, board. I do processing every evening, so it's easier for me, and then I do a bigger processing every week. How it works is everything I need to do for today, I'm putting into a today column, right? Everything I need to do tomorrow, I put for the tomorrow column, and then this week column. And after 1 week, I really don't care. It's like too big of a time frame, so everything else is in further ahead, right? And once a week, I put, again, everything in this week that is scheduled for this week. Now, what's important here, that I put absolutely everything here, both work and private related things, because from my perspective, we have like one time, maybe it's a founder perspective, maybe it's like, because I know that a lot of specialists working in a company, they're like, okay, I have my company phone, I have my private phone, I have my company to-do list, I have my private to-do list. For me, it's a lot of hassle and overhead to manage two of those, so I use just one. And another thing is, I talked a lot about the organization and about capturing, but if you're not actually doing the work, if you don't have set up a routine or a framework for, okay, when are your actual work hours, right? What are your sleeping hours? When do you process the inbox? And do you have like, I don't know, maybe leisure time or personal time or whatever? It's like, because if you have that framework, then you're not pushing yourself that every time you have this buffer that, hey, after 5 p.m., I can just work for 3 more hours. It doesn't matter that I didn't actually do what I planned to do, right? And kids help with that greatly. That's why I mentioned that kids are like important part of it, that I didn't have kids before, because kids force a framework upon you, right? You just, hey, you need to put them to bed, you need to give them food, you need to wake them up, you need to give them food, you need to drive them to the kindergarten, you need to pick them up from the kindergarten. Those elements kind of force you into a framework, right? But if you don't have them, you definitely need to force yourself into some kind of other framework other than by kids, right? That, hey, I need to leave at 5 p.m. or at 6 p.m. or whatever you're leaving work, right? Because then suddenly you know that you need to handle everything you need to handle today by 5 p.m. So the whole idea of getting things done is that it reduces your anxiety because you're 100% sure that you haven't dropped a ball on anything, right? There's not a 50 things in your head constantly like fighting for attention, and oh, I need to do this and I need to do this, and John wanted something from me and I need to remember about this, right? Because everything is in the system. And it's freeing up a lot of mental space, and once you get a hang of it, you actually know your output, very similar to production sprints, right? In a production sprints, when you're learning that your team can do this much in this amount of time, right? You're also learning a lot about yourself, because believe me, it's puzzling for me that 30, 40, 50-year-old people, they're still very optimistic about how much time they need to do a deep task, for example, right? It's like, no, it sounds like 2 hours. And then it's 6, right? Or 8 every time. And we're surprised that our production doesn't work, right? And there we underestimate. When we underestimate our own personal work that has no dependencies sometimes. Okay, moving on to personal knowledge management. We're going to come back to getting things done in the iteration. I haven't read that many books about it as I did on the productivity. I read like Second Brain, How to Read a Book, but one that really stuck out was How to Take Smart Notes. That introduced the Zettelkasten method, and originally it's aimed at scientists, so it's very useful for somebody that use writing as their body of work, right? Like for academia, articles, books, whatever. The whole goal is that in your personal knowledge management system, you're trying to connect this huge web of your insights in a hope that it will spark some new type of knowledge. So it definitely needs adjustment for game dev, right? You cannot, from my perspective, I tried, you cannot take it as is. But the key points are that whenever you have like an insight, like a thought that this is like an interesting piece of information, you're making an atomic note about it, and you think how to link that note into your other notes. How does this connect with something? Like I don't know, you're reading a book about American nuclear attack submarine and how they handle leadership there, and you think, hey, that's interesting. How can we apply that into, I don't know, team leadership and game dev production, right? And you have some thought about it, you make a note and you link it. But the most important part is it's a nonlinear organization. So you're not trying to like do a Wikipedia of, hey, this is, I don't know, alphabetically or by date or by science source. You're trying to put those notes into areas of your interest. So for example, you're making a video game. This video game is themed in a certain historical period, right? So your notes in the same place are going to relate to both interesting facts in that history period, but it's going to include also gameplay loops used by other games. Those things don't necessarily going to be immediately connected. So the funny thing is that you do the exactly same thing, so it's easily integrated with getting things done, because every time you have an insight, you capture it, and then the difference is that ideally every 2-3 days, you should process it. And what does it mean? It's when you're capturing a note, it's just a thought, right? Oh, this is interesting, right? We have this moment. This is interesting. I'm going to write it down. But then after 2 or 3 days, you look at it, and sometimes it's not that interesting anymore. So you just delete it. That's fine. But if you still think that it's those initial notes are called, in the Zettelkasten method, they're called fleeting notes. But if you think that they're worth actually properly noting down into your system, you call them permanent notes, and you then you format it properly, make it all nice. In the ideal world, this would be something that you could like copy or paste into your blog or your article, or send it to a friend that, hey, this is my thoughts, this is an interesting thought on the subject, right? So it should be already like properly formatted, and then it's a permanent note. Now, the biggest challenge at the beginning is to differentiate knowledge from insight, because our initial intuition is to just like note everything that's interesting, right? But we don't live in a world where there is a lack of knowledge availability, right? There's abundance of it. Like, it's at the tip of our hands. We can Google it. We can ask ChatGPT and then double check it. We can do we can do a lot of things, right? But knowledge is easily accessible. So it doesn't make sense to capture it, because then suddenly what, you're copying Wikipedia or the internet into your like personal knowledge management system. Doesn't make any sense. So you're only capturing insights. So like this piece of information and this piece of information and my thought on it, that it interconnects in some way, right? And it's interesting for me. So how I do it, when I read a paper book, I just have a paper notebook for capturing my fleeting notes. When I use Kindle Scribe for reading ebooks, so you could also write on a paper book. It's just, I'm from the generation that like I can't do it, but on Kindle I can. On Kindle I'm scribing on the book. When I'm listening to an audiobook, I use the same dictaphone app. Sometimes the source of nice insight actually ends up in my inbox somehow, right? I don't know, somebody sends me a link to something via communicators or whatever. So sometimes it ends up in my GTD inbox, and then I'm processing it. And sometimes I can just simply write it down when I have time, write it down into my app on my phone. I personally use Obsidian. There are, again, a lot of apps for making notes, right? Like, ask any designer at your company, they're gonna like, or writer or whoever, they're gonna tell you like 10 different apps that you can use, like Evernote, OneNote, whatever. I chose Obsidian, and it looks like this. Like, it's simply like a list of notes in the areas that are interesting for me, right? And then there is a simple note about it, and that you could tag or link into your other notes. So the whole idea is that the biggest advantage is that it prevents you from starting from scratch when you're starting any knowledge-related project, right? So, for example, let's say that I'm a world builder. I mean, a narrative designer that's responsible for lore, right? So I put a lot of notes about, you know, different history, interesting insights that I have from different cultures, or whatever else that inspires me to be a narrative designer that creates worlds, right? And then when I have, like, I don't know, a new brief to be done, a new pitch to be done, or I want to do a GIC talk, right? The whole idea is that you're not starting from scratch. You don't have the blank first page fear out of it. So that's one benefit, and I can see it already. I used some notes for this presentation. But the biggest payoff, in theory, is that it should lead to some, you know, like breakthrough, like really interesting, maybe a really interesting game idea, maybe a scientific breakthrough, whatever it's gonna be, right? You're gonna weave in, oh, this would be actually a good idea for writing a book, for example. Obviously, I'm not there yet. I'm using personal knowledge management for like 1 year. Getting things done, it's like 5-6 years, so I'm much better at it, but stay tuned. Okay. So, but the fun part is that it's just like a framework, and everybody is different here, right? I'm sure that, you know, some people want to work during the night, some people want to work in the morning, some people want open spaces, some people don't want them, some people want full remote, whatever. The fun idea about your own productivity is that you should adjust it as much as possible to yourself, right? And it shouldn't be actually a chore. It shouldn't be something that you do like against your will. And for example, I don't necessarily recommend this book, because how it happened is like I read first 20 pages, like, oh, maybe you're gonna have a morning routine and that's a nice idea, and I just start doing it the next day. So before I even finished the book. So it was not about the book, it's about the idea. So when I was younger, after hours, after like 10, 12 hours of work, because, you know, I was young, I was coming back home and I would start working on something like a personal project, for example, on, I don't know, on Unity or something, right? I was working on a game. And the thing is that when the years come by and the kids came in, I wasn't able to do it in the evening. The only thing I was able to do is play video games. And after a couple of years, I was like so frustrated with it. It's like there's no self-development, right? There's just work. That when I found out about, hey, maybe just wake up earlier when everybody else is asleep. It's like 5 p.m. at the office, and then do it. So worked like a charm, and I was a night owl. I was the person who stayed up to. I even had a. My wife was laughing at me about it. It's like that if you go to sleep before 12 a.m., you're a pussy, right? It's like, no, you need to like power through and you need to do your work during the night. But I now waking up at 4:45. I'm walking my dog at 5 a.m., listening to an audiobook. I have a shower at 5:30. I start reading my paper book or Kindle at 6. And at 6:30, I start working on some kind of my personal project, whatever it's going to be. Unreal Engine tutorial, GIC talk preparation, article on Medium, whatever else. At 7:30, we start our family routine, like, you know, waking up the kids, breakfast, driving them to kindergarten. And at 9 a.m., I'm at work. So obviously, this went through a lot of iterations. And also the fun thing about any routine, be it in the morning or in the evening, is that it can be whatever. You should be excited about it. If you're not excited about the fact that, okay, I'm actually have dedicated time to reading a book, then you should switch up your routine. Maybe reading a book is not your thing. Maybe you're a podcast person. Maybe, I don't know, maybe there's this TV show that you wanted to binge. Whatever, but it's a dedicated time to yourself, right? And you're deciding what is it. Like, for example, a lot of morning routine rituals are like meditation or yoga. I tried all of it. Not for me. A lot of people like it, right? I have my yoga or meditation, however you're going to call it, in the shower. Maybe not very sustainable ecologically, but yeah, everybody's different. Another little adjustment. There's a book called Eat That Frog. Also, you don't need to read it. I'm going to tell it to you in 20 seconds. When everybody has a task that they dread, right? It's like, I don't want to do this shit. I don't want to do this shit. And you procrastinate it for 2 weeks, then you finally need to do it, and you do it in an hour, and it's over, and you're like, why was I dreading for 2 weeks? It's like, I just could have done it, right? Many times that happened before. So the idea is that you consciously decide that this is the task I hate the most, so this is the first thing you do in the morning. When you come to work. And I actually did a custom sticker on my Trello. Every evening I pick the tasks that I don't want to do this, like prepare a speech for GIC. So this is the first thing I'm going to do in the morning. I'm sure a lot of you heard about the book Flow, right? It's been cited all over the world in many speeches in many other books. So I don't want to this is actually a book that I do recommend you read. It's hard to pitch it in 20 seconds, to describe it entirely in 20 seconds. But in short, sometimes when you're doing a task that is challenging enough, but not hard enough, not so hard that it's discouraging, you can enter a state of flow where you have like a very high efficiency. The time flows super fast, your efficiency is super high, and you're really enjoying your work. But what is interesting is not about what flow is, but how to maximize statistically entering into the flow state, right? It's like because you cannot kind of like control it like that, but you can give yourself an opportunity to have a chance for it. So first and foremost, the increased awareness of context switching. Like in my job, I have a lot of context switching, right? Like I'm fixing some fire in this project, then I'm talking to this publisher, right? Then I'm on this meeting, then I do something else. There's a lot of context switching. And every time you switch a context, it costs energy, right? It makes you more tired. And by the way, like multitasking is bullshit. By the way, I didn't put that book, but Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow is a book you should all read, and it's about like this is how just the brain works, right? So multitasking is impossible. If you think you're a multitasker, you're just really quickly switching contexts, which in reality costs a lot of energy and is sub-efficient. So increased awareness about one's hours. Like each and every one of you should know when they are most efficient, and you should schedule some kind of a deep task, creative tasks into those hours, right? Like for example, if I won't do a creative task by 5 p.m., by 3 p.m., sorry, I'm not gonna do it this day. It's not gonna happen, right? I know myself. I need to do it in the hours between 9 and 3 p.m. And also there are techniques to like improve context switching. Like I know that a lot of creatives use it. Like for example, I don't know, you wanna do a trailer for a cyberpunk game, right? So you might, when you're thinking about the story or you're thinking about the script, you create a custom playlist for cyberpunk, right? Cyberpunk titles. So, and you listen for it for a couple of minutes, you switch yourself. There's a lot of things like built in Outlook, for example, that all your meetings are 5 minutes shorter automatically. If you schedule a 1 hour block, it's actually 55, right? Which allows you not run from meeting to a meeting, and for the first 10 minutes, you're like, where am I? It's like, what is this meeting about, right? You're not wasting, you have this couple of minutes to actually switch the context. And there's also a Pomodoro technique. I'm sure some of you heard about it, right? That you work for 25 minutes, 5-minute breaks, 25 minutes, 5-minute breaks. You do it 4 times, then you do a longer break. That's how you do a deep task. So a lot of things, like how to put yourself into a flow state. Another thing that I think in game development, probably in every desk job with meetings, but in game development, our calendars usually suck, right? We have, and the bigger the company, the worse it gets. So there's this book, Death by a Meeting, that made me, well, there are many books mentioned that, but I chose one because it had meeting in the name. To completely rework my calendar, right? So first and foremost, one of the most important things is to schedule inside your calendar when you work at a company, schedule the time for work. So when you're actually working on your job, whatever it's gonna be, you're a programmer, you're an artist, whatever, you have a scheduled as a slot so that nobody's gonna give you a meeting there, right? And that's a thing, because if your calendar is constantly open, then you suddenly have meetings like this, and you're constantly context switching, and you're super unproductive. So my calendar looks like this. You don't see shit, don't you? So the darker ones, they're green on my screen, the darker ones are my deep task slots, right? So there are scheduled slots. Basically the entire Thursday and Tuesday and Thursday, I have like no meeting Tuesdays, no meeting Thursdays, right? So this entire day is blocked off, and I have custom blocks just for deep work, right? On Wednesday, I have my all one-on-ones with my direct reports. So I'm meeting with my heads of departments on Wednesdays. So actually, if somebody wants to schedule an unprompted meeting with me, the only chance they have in reality is either Monday or Friday, right? Another great book I recommend, Deep Work, made me do a bi-monthly solo retreat. So every 2 months, I negotiated this with my wife, is that every 2 months I'm going alone into a cabin in the woods for like three days. Usually I take 1 day off on Friday. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'm in Wisła in a cabin in the woods doing just deep work. And the rule is it can be nothing operational from Anshar Studios. It can be creative, like creating a pitch or a trailer script or whatever else. But it needs to be a creative deep task, and it cannot require like writing emails or any operational stuff. Great thing, so I should be doing this 6 times a year. Usually I do it 4 times, you know how it is. But I deeply recommend that. Sorry, misclick. And I think last thing I wanted to mention, a lot of books, I only picked Atomic Habits because it also mentions it, but a lot of books mentions journaling as part of self-development, right? So a lot of designers, for example, do journals about the video games they played, what they found interesting about the video games they're playing. I do a game journal, I do a book journal, and I have a diary, but to be honest, like my diary is like once a week. So I don't do a daily diary. Once a week I do like a week summary in my diary. But to summarize, I don't want you to like overthink it. There is a diminishing returns by doing that. So I know that a lot of people who went down that road of like productivity geeks, you know, that are reading all those books and hearing all those podcasts about productivity, they actually build up anxiety that they're not productive enough. So it's like the whole idea was to reduce anxiety, but then they have anxiety because they think that they can do better. So for that, I deeply recommend 4,000 Weeks, because this book basically says that screw the whole productivity movement, right? It's like it has a very high diminishing returns, and what you do should bring you joy and fulfillment, right? Not anxiety. So while after reading that book, I didn't drop my productivity routines. I did, it did actually made me care less about if I'm 100% productive. So to summarize, right now, I work around 45 hours a week. The time I chose to use a lot of my time that I got back, I choose on self-development, on learning. That's what most of my morning routine is about. I have 2 kids, and as I mentioned, it's important from the perspective of that framework, and also for the context. It's like we're splitting our responsibilities with my wife, like 40% me, 60% my wife. My wife's right here, so you know, it's like 40% me. And another very important thing, I do believe that I have much greater and high quality output than I had 10 years ago. Obviously, some can argue, okay, but you're more experienced, that's why. But I honestly believe that there are super diminishing returns in crunching yourself and overworking yourself for long periods of time. So being super conscious about how you spend your time is the way to go. And I'm still behind. The work is infinite, like the things in my task list, like everybody's nagging me about something, right? The thing is that I don't care that much anymore, right? It's like, I'm gonna get to it, don't worry. So you should have fun with it. That's also a thing, right? Like for me, it's every time I'm tweaking something or changing something, I'm actually looking forward to waking up. Oh, I'm gonna continue to read that book. I'm gonna continue to this and that. And I'm actually super happy about it. And that's it. Thank you. Are there any questions? That was quick. Do we have a mic, or should I give mine, or I don't know? Yes. So here, Kuba has a question. No pressure. Don't give the microphone to this person. It's because I see by their face that they want to have a...
Yeah, I just wanted to question, you said journaling, right?
Yes.
And me personally, I was, a few times in my life, I was thinking like, hey, maybe I should start writing a journal. But the thing that eludes me is like, why the hell would you do it? Like, do you read them? Like every month you go through your journal, it's like, oh, I read that book. Or,
no,
you know.
No. So there are 2 reasons for that. The most important reason is that there has been proven scientifically that if you write something with your hand instead of typing it into your computer, you remember it better, right? So it's simply like a memory technique from like, you're gonna remember those insights for longer. So that's, I would say, main reason for having a game journal and a book journal. The diary, actually, I do read once a year because I do a weekly diary, and then I read those 50 something, right? 52, whatever, entries, and I read them, and sometimes it's a very stressful journey because, you know, you're like, oh, this week I'm stressing about this or something, or, you know, this deal has gone bust, or you know how the founders usually what they have problems about, right? And they're like, oh, the whole year I was stressing about this particular project. And so I find this once a year refreshing to like, okay, this year was like this, right? But no, I'm not, or at least I didn't in recent years go back to my game and book journals.
All right, thanks. The second quick question is that you said you were a night person, and then you started doing your morning routines. Did you straight up jump from like
Yeah, it was
going
called,
to sleep on midnight
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
waking up at 5?
Yeah, that was no. Yeah, yes, that was called.
Yes
turkey.
or no?
No. It's like, but I immediately started to go to sleep at 10, right? But yes, that was cold turkey, and I did it immediately, and it's like giving up. I think anybody who gave up coffee know how it feels for the first 2-3 days. So it felt like that, right? After 2-3 days, I was fine.
Do you still drink coffee?
Oh yes, I'm waking up at 4:45, but at 6 a.m. I have my first coffee.
Hi, I wanted to ask, because you meant like the whole talk is about frameworks and how you get into them. I wanted to ask whether there was a time where you fell out of it, like your routine, and if you did, how did you get back?
Oh yeah. So first of all, and actually I forget to tell that, but I think that that's very important part, and thank you for that question, is that that's fine if you fell it out. The most important thing is to come back to it, right? Because there are a lot of people who started on this journey, and they're like, the whole idea is to reduce anxiety, and they're like, oh my God, I didn't wake up today. It's like, oh, I'm useless. It's I can't do anything right? And that's fine. It's the important thing is to, like productivity journey is not like a, I don't know, AA journey, right? It's not that big of a deal that you fell off the wagon. So the important thing is to come back to it. I, for example, hate conferences. I love conferences. I hate conferences from that perspective because you cannot, right? There are parties, there are things to do. It's like you're not going to go to sleep. I mean, maybe some people do, but you're not going to go to sleep at 10 p.m. at a gaming conference, right? So, for example, I'm not having my morning routine, and I miss it. I mean, it's lovely with all you here, right? But so every time I come back, and if it repeats, like there are many conferences together, right, etc., it is kind of frustrating, but for me, after so many years, I'm just looking forward to coming back to it, right? But I wouldn't stress too much about it.
Hello. I wanted to ask your business days from Monday to Friday look pretty structured, but what about the days off? Do you make in the same routine for days off, or it's the days when you don't want to do anything?
Yeah. So I do my morning routine, I do 7 days a week, right? And actually on the weekends, I do it for an hour longer because the kids sleep in, right? So we have a breakfast at 8:30 at the earliest. So I can do my personal project for an hour more, and I love it. So I do the routine for the whole week, but I have very unstructured weekends in a sense that it's structured about around family time, right? So yes, I do my processing in the Sunday evening, but during the day on Saturday and Sunday, it's like I usually spend it with the family.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. I actually have a question. When you said that you are structuring both your business stuff and your personal stuff during the week, how did you overcome this urge to absolutely free your mind, do something crazy, go somewhere, or maybe immerse yourself in a game that you don't feel like, okay, I have an hour to play a game, after an hour I need to finish, but you just go all in and suddenly realize it's the middle of the night. Don't you have such urges?
Yeah, that's interesting because when we had this discussions at our last company party, I got asked the same question by one of our employees. She was talking about books. It's like, hey, when you're reading a book, how come you stop and just go? It's a great book, right? So maybe it's the fact about the way I am structured, because I want to be like, I'm excited by, I start a lot of things, I'm excited, I need my dopamine shot, right? So I'm actually excited about starting a new thing after half an hour, right? So it's not that big of a problem for me. And for video games specifically, I don't know. The thing is that every time I think about video games, it's like, okay, I lost it. It's like I'm not playing anymore. It's like it's not fun anymore. There are no games, right? And I come to that realization like every month, and then some games comes out and I'm like off the rails and I'm just playing it, right? But I'm still playing it in the unstructured, I would say, hours. I had this with, I don't know, recently with New World, an MMO. Don't start it. It's an MMO. But for example, last year that was Alan Wake for me, right? So no, not last year. Last year? Yes, last year. Okay, but no, I don't have that problem. I don't know why. Okay. One more question here. And one more here.
Okie dokie. Hi, thank you for the talk. I wonder, because the structure that you explained here, this whole capture process work thing, ultimately leads to this morning routine that you mentioned, to the frog that you mentioned, right? And I wonder, let's take this gig talk as an example. If this is this morning task that you have, do you create like an inception loop of productivity? So do you use the same tools to like optimize the time when you're actually doing the task? So when you sit down to work on a gig talk, do you go through the whole like capture process work thing again? Or this is the place where you actually let go a little and let yourself wander and be maybe a bit less optimized and productive, but within this framework that you've been given?
Oh no, obviously it super heavily depends on the task, right? It's if it's a GAC talk, for example, then depending on if I'm just thinking about the initial slides or I'm polishing it, like the most important difference, I think, is it a moment in this project, in this task, that I can turn off the communicators and don't go on the internet, right? Because then it's the easiest. Like for example, I turn off all my communicators when I'm starting to do any deep task, right? And the thing is that there is this, every project has like the same phases like a game production. So first you do your like R&D, like you first capture everything from the internet or whatever else you need your information, then you process it, etc. But I wouldn't say it's that structured. It's like I just used, like in the morning I just have 1 hour. That's 2 Pomodoros. That's 2 25-minute slots. And I'm just, you know, just, okay, what I need to do next to do it, right? But in the getting things done methodology, the whole idea is that if you have this task on your to-do list for today, it shouldn't require you to think about what am I supposed to do. This task should already entail that this is what you're supposed to do. I'm supposed to, I don't know, write 2 pages paragraph about something. But if that means that you needed to do research on that topic before, that should be the task, right? So in short, I think to answer your question, a task on a getting things done list shouldn't be a project. It should be a next step of the project, the next action item. He was, okay. 3 more questions.
Do you know the article called Manager Schedule, Maker Schedule?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is I think what you said, that maybe you just work this way, because managers work the way based on calendar. Like it's always a question of what comes next, so hour after hour. But people who develop stuff like programmers cannot work like that. If they get interrupted after 1 hour, they do 0 work. So maybe that's why. No, not really a question, just saying.
No, I totally agree with that. But if you're a programmer and you know that it works this way, right? Then you, like for example, when I'm starting programming, 1 hour is nothing, right? This is nothing. Like I can do a tutorial on Unreal in an hour in the morning. That's fine. But I can do, like I'm not even touching code when I don't have 3-4 hours, right? But that's me. Maybe somebody else has something else. The beauty about it is that you should know yourself, right? You should know your craft, that those things requires uninterrupted work for 3 hours or 4 hours or whatever. And you should structure your whole framework and routine around that. 5 minutes left. We have 2 questions here.
Thank you for the great talk.
Where are you, Tobias? I can hear your voice.
I'm here.
Oh, here. Yeah.
Yes. So I love the process as well, but I'm curious how you found the time for processing. You mentioned the challenge doing that during conferences while traveling or so. But how did you find this moment? Because that's the one I use the processes as well, but that's where I struggle to find a consistent time actually where I do this planning ahead for the next day, etc.
So the worst part about it is that theoretically in the process you could do it once a week, but I found out that that's too long. There's so many tasks that I have that it's going to be over, and I'm going to spend like 4 hours processing on Sunday, which doesn't sound fun. So what I do is I do it basically every day before I go to sleep, right? And then it's suddenly 15-20 minutes, and it's not that big of a deal because you do it every day.
Hello, thank you for the talk. I have 2 questions. One is, does your wife have a full-time job?
Yes.
Because yes, okay, great. So you're
I wasn't joking with the 40-60, if that's your question.
super parenting, awesome, good for you guys. And the other question is, if somebody wants to walk in your shoes, be a founder, what would you, like, if you have a heart-to-heart talk with this person, what is the thing they should give up right now? The thing they should...
You know, there was this, I absolutely hate to use an Elon Musk reference in this talk, and I think some of you know why. But there is this great article about written by a wife of Elon Musk, and it's about obsession. And it's like, she described him as obsessed about something, right? So what I gave up is I have a very uninteresting personality outside of game development. It's like, that's my personality, right? That's how it's, so I gave up everything besides family, I would say. But that's me. I think everybody is different. And if your question is a hidden question, how to be a founder while having family, and you do want to have a life and you want to have kids, I would just say you definitely can, right? I have no idea how to do it alone, though. I think that we support immensely each other with my wife, and that's why it works. But I definitely think you can do it. I think last question, Marcin. Yep. I'll be outside if anybody else wants to.
Thanks. I have a quick one. So you inspired me by those bi-monthly retreats.
Yeah, they're awesome.
I need to start negotiating that too.
Yeah.
But I wonder if you treat this time, like, do you heavily prepare for it?
Yes.
So you basically go out and I'm ready to go. I want to be super productive. Or you kind of like treat it like this is the time for myself when I can gather my thoughts.
So what I actually do, I even have a diary input. Funny that you ask. I have a diary input that says that maybe I'm over structuring things and I don't have enough time just for deep thinking. You know, that was one of my thoughts throughout the weeks. But no, I actually heavily prepare just the topic I want to work on. It's a creative topic, right? Like a game pitch, game idea. I want to create a game pitch or something, right? Or I want to explore this game idea. And then I just structure deep work slots. I'm not structuring like to-do lists, but no, here I'm gonna on a walk with my dog, here I'm gonna eat something, and here 4 Pomodoros, okay, on this, right? And I'm always honestly overreaching, but there is this quote, aim high, fell short, do well, right? So I'm usually not doing 100% of that, but I'm usually super happy with the effects. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, we're on time. Thank you very much for the attendance. See you around.